All right, Ben, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead and just flip the on button on the podium mic. And then you can advance your slides with the big green arrow.
Yep. The big green arrow. That's right. Okay. All right. Well, hello, everyone. We're going to chair and present as a team for this session. My name is Ben Woods, and I am joined today here in person by Chris Spells, remotely with Renee Richardson Keller. And so we're going to give a talk about the Supplemental Appropriations Program, a little background, and a little bit of where we've been and where we're going. But we're first going to just talk a little bit about our team. And Mark Vincent leads our team. We're within the Observations and Research Support Division at Weather Program Office. And so he's kind of our captain. But we thought we'd just kind of introduce all of the members of the team. And I'll go first since I've got the microphone at the moment. But I came to WPO almost 4 years ago. My background, though, is mostly in the private sector and mostly as a forecaster in operations. I have done weather sales, but in my role at WPO, I kind of am more the DRSA program lead and, of course, work with the team and not pictured here, and Renee will talk about this, other people that help us, but these are just the WPO members of our team, but we get support and work across line offices and with other labs and program offices. But again, I am almost 4 years at the helm of some of the supplemental programs. And Chris Spells, he and I like to think of each other as interchangeable, although he's more the BIL lead. But I'll turn it over to him so he can say hello as well.
Thanks, Ben. So I'm Chris Spells, and Ben said he stole some of my thunder. I am the bipartisan infrastructure law lead. I came to WPO about 3 years ago. My background is actually remote sensing, radiative transfer, and atmospheric retrievals, specifically over the tropical Atlantic Ocean and aerosol-laden atmospheres. So that's a quick background on myself, and I'll throw it over to Renee for a quick introduction from her.
Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I heard a yes. So my name is Renee Richardson Keller. I am a program coordinator with WPO for the observations program, but I also provide program support to Ben and Chris over in the supplemental appropriations program. Background on me, my background is actually in air-sea interactions with hurricanes, so I'm very much enjoying this meeting. I always do. So I will stop it at that. Wish I could join in person. I'm very jealous that I've missed the churro snacks at the breaks for the past 2 years. Hopefully next year I'll finally get to have that.
Yeah, the churros were yesterday, Renee. Sorry.
I know, I heard, and I'm very jealous, very jealous. But I'll pass it back to Ben so we can get started.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. I guess those virtual churros just aren't the same, huh?
No.
All right, thanks, Renee. A little more from her. I'm going to kind of take the first portion here and talk a little bit about the program. And there's more than one supplemental, but you might be saying, well, what is a supplemental? That was my first question when I came to work for WPO almost 4 years ago. But think of it as outside the normal NOAA annual budget process. But because it is outside that, it is kind of urgently put together, needs to be urgently executed. There's not a lot of time to react. So they're kind of short-fused funding mechanisms to get, mostly in our case, acceleration on some weather research. And I list there just the circumstances could be emergencies that arise from the safety of human life and the protection of property. That's obviously what we've been talking about all week here. And I've put an updated map here. You've probably seen this before, of the billion-dollar disasters that have affected the United States. We broke the record back in September when we surpassed 22 of these $1 billion disasters in this country. Back in September, we broke the record that was held in 2020, I believe. We are now up to 25. And of course, we're not quite done with the year yet. And when looking out my hotel window last night, I wonder if we were going to get 26 here in Miami. It was raining so hard. But what's not pictured here is smoke from wildfires. There's, of course, the wildfire in Maui that was quite devastating. But smoke up in eastern Canada, the fires up in eastern Canada spread down across the eastern United States and affected a lot of people and affected, those with respiratory conditions. So although smoke's not on here, the fact that it affected a lot of people, including Washington, D.C., where funding comes from, might suggest we'll see another wildfire supplemental. But yeah, this is quite a map and a lot put on there. I had to kind of squish it to fit it on this slide. More germane to this group is the hurricanes that have happened in recent years that have spawned the hurricane portions of the supplemental. In fact, when I first came to WPO, they were mainly called the hurricane supplementals. But in recent years, wildfires have been added into there. And each supplemental, and we deal with a number of them, have different sub areas or focus areas within them. So it's not just hurricanes, but that's a big part of what we use and do the research with, but also extreme precipitation, flooding, data assimilation, weather forecasting. But anyway, this is some of the catalysts for the previous supplementals. And it's by the numbers. These are some pretty impressive numbers. Now, it's a little misleading that 170 million, that's not exactly the amount that goes through the Weather Program Office. And it's not like, well, even though I was handing out drink coupons last night at the evening reception, it's not like I'm sitting on that money and can give it out to anybody. We're just kind of the conduits to the process across all these supplementals. So you can see there's quite a number of projects. There's the breakdown. I was mentioning some of these different categories. And you could almost even say 177 million if you include the Data Assimilation Consortium that's part of the IRA. But we're kind of mainly temporarily helping out with that. But anyway, 170 million is big enough number. So this is, again, just a little bit of a breakdown. I apologize for some of the abbreviations that you might not all be familiar with, but some in this room worked on the FY 18-19 supplemental, and that's almost done. In fact, it would be if we didn't already have some no-cost extensions that extended the life of some of those projects. But 33 of the 38 projects have now been completed, and we're tracking to bring this portfolio, kind of the combined two of them, kind of to a safe and smooth landing. And then the DRSA, and sometimes you'll see that in here referred to as FY22, but the Disaster Relief Supplemental Act, only 2 of those have been completed, but for many, the work's really getting going. We are starting to see some results. It's exciting. And again, many in this room are involved in that. And we are working through some challenges with that. High performance computing is something that Chris will talk about. And that affects really, you can almost put that below each of these supplemental. And by the way, these other 2 here, this laser, yeah, these 2 here, we put in kind of a different background color because they're a little bit different, different format from these earlier 2 that the team has worked on. The BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, is spread across so many different groups, so many different line offices and teams that are working on that. We don't have as much, I don't want to say control, but the management of that is more difficult with so many provisions. Even just provision 3 is very complex. So BIL is divided into provisions. IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is divided into buckets. So, and again, that we're kind of more temporarily involved in that. There's more to be seen on just how that will be co-managed in the future. All right, going to talk just a little bit about some that we work with the support on these portfolios. And again, this group is familiar with that, but much of what we do is the monitoring and reporting, and Renee will talk more about this, of all these projects. And you can see here the number of funded partners and the investment just in the hurricane portion across all those portfolios. Now, some in the room are familiar with Smartsheet. That is a platform, and some are groaning in the room. NOAA's going toward this. So my suggestion is to, embrace, grin and bear it. There is a learning curve when it comes to Smartsheet. And I just took kind of for the hurricane projects for the DRSA, just sort of a project dashboard for all the hurricanes, but just to kind of show you what it looks like. And it continues to evolve. We do have some help in getting some of this looking the way we want. I'm going to kind of quickly go through just how the different hurricane projects are broken down. And you might say, well, why Why some of the grays there in November? Because Smartsheet operates on a monthly basis. So some of you project managers in the room get an automated Smartsheet email. It says it's from me, but really it's from the Smartsheet system. So we need those monthly updates, even though we're really porting to know our leadership really once a quarter. So just keep that in mind. And this is just, again, showing the schedule. And then, of course, we track as part of our reporting and monitoring to track the risk and issues for all of your projects. We have to kind of collect scores from them to kind of be able to better communicate what risks and issues are affecting the portfolio up to NOAA leadership. So we take that, that's very important that we get as accurate data there as we can. And that's just some more of the different risks and issues. And the one you see in red there that kind of sticks out is HPC. And again, that's not unique to DRSA, but that's a challenge kind of for us all, the high performance computing. I did want to say that one thing we started earlier this year, back in the spring, we started monthly newsletters. So I kind of create the DRSA monthly newsletter, and Chris does the BIL monthly newsletter. Again, this is part of just our communication to the groups. You could almost say that we're in a way communication managers as much as anything else, because we're really trying to communicate to several groups. But part of that is we need the information from you. So if you're encountering a problem, you're having something that's affecting you meeting your milestones, let us know. It could be something systemic to all the programs or even all of NOAA. Certainly things when it comes to, we talked about it yesterday, the DA, right? DA scientists, contractors, kind of hard to come by. So again, the more we know from you, the better we can communicate that to NOAA leadership and other parties. All right, well, I've spoken for a while. We're going to turn it over to Renee Richardson-Keller, going to talk more about the communication aspect of the supplemental program. All yours, Renee.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, so I'm going to be touching on the communications within the program in its entirety. So, okay, we're on the right slide. All right, so before I get into the what and the why we communicate, I really think it's important to touch on who we report and communicate to. So this slide covers the overall structure of the oversight of the supplemental portfolios managed by the program that Ben just covered in those slides. This slide is a bit busy, but I'm going to do my best to walk through it to discuss the communication chain. So right in the middle, you can see the blue bubble WPO program leads with several arrows pointing to and from this position. The program leads, Ben and Chris, are at the center of it all and are in constant communication with project managers, program officers, administrative officers, specifically those dealing with budget, and you'll see line office communications to and from their roles as well. So the program leads will communicate necessary action items and updates to the support team, which is the next bubble up. And Ben and Chris are also a part of this team. And this team also includes myself and folks from NWS STI, including Shira Francis, Aaron Poyer, Will Komoromi, and Cami Sims. And before I get into moving further up on the chain, I just want to mention that on a quarterly basis, the team hosts quarterly project reviews or QPRs, where the project managers will come together and report out on project progress, whether or not the project remains on track, any risk and issues, or any asset they may have for the team. And I will say the program management and executive teams are in attendance for these QPRs, but the support team is really doing the bulk of ingesting and distilling the key points from these reviews. So once the items move through the support team, and the program management team, which consists of the supplemental program manager, Mark Vincent, and NWS STI folks, including Kevin Garrett and Nicole Kurkowski, the key points are then communicated through to the executive team. And this team consists of Stephen Smith, the director of NWS STI, Jen Mahoney, the director of OER GSL, and Ray Tanabe, the acting director of OER WPO, who is very recently joined since Dorothy Koch's departure. And this executive team communicates these key items up to NOAA leadership, which is then communicated up to Rick Spinrad, to the Hill, wherever they feel most fitting. So the main takeaway from all of this on the slide is that the work being done under these portfolios doesn't just sit within the team. It is communicated up the chain of command to NOAA leadership on a quarterly basis. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've covered how and who we report and communicate to, so I'm going to move into the what and why we communicate. So these next 3 slides are going to show examples of what we call accomplishment slides that came straight from briefings to NOAA leadership. And these slides are prepped by the support team. And big shout out to Sheriff Francis, who I believe is in the room, for working with me each quarter and getting these developed on a very quick turnaround. So I'm not going to go into the details of each project highlighted on these slides, as I'm not affiliated with the project itself, but more so going to talk about the method to the madness of developing these slides. So when we develop these, it's crucial to keep the information very concise due to the briefing time constraint, and we must keep it in plain language, all while ensuring that we cover exactly why this work is important and beneficial to society. So in this particular slide, we highlighted the completion of one of the FY19 projects led by Frank Marks in the latest NOAA leadership brief. And up front, you'll see that we highlighted that this project successfully accelerated the development of data assimilation capabilities for HAFS, as well as supported social science efforts to develop recommendations to improve risk communication. So big picture up front on these slides. Next slide, please. So this accomplishment slide was a very exciting one to put together and to share. This highlights the completion of a FY18 project led by Vijay Talabragada and Avishal Mehra that successfully delivered the 2 configurations of HAFS to NTO for operational transition, and highlighted that the transition was successfully completed. So this was, again, a really exciting one to share with NOAA leadership back in May. Next slide, please. So we don't only highlight projects that have completed, we also highlight excellent progress of active projects as well. So this slide covers a DRSA project led by Cheyenne Steinberger. In this latest reporting cycle, Cheyenne reported on the current successes of the Ocean Atmospheric Observing Experiment, chaos, of which Greg reported out on yesterday, I believe. And the big takeaway for this slide was how important the supplemental support has been in leading to the successful deployments of the various instruments and the coordinated observations received so far. So a key point that was also highlighted to really get this message across was that these funds allowed for 150 more glider days in 2023 compared to 2022 with no DRSA funds. So that was a big point to get across. So next slide, please. All right, so I discussed the communications internal to NOAA, but what about external? So over the past couple of years, communications to the public has become a more popular topic in the supplemental realm, as it has been relatively lacking. There's an immense amount of great research across all weather sectors within these portfolios, like Ben touched on earlier. But our question was, how can we effectively convey all of these advancements and successes to a wide range of audiences? So our team started using the ArcGIS Story Map platform as a vessel to tell the story of each portfolio. And there's a big advantage here to using this platform because we can illustrate these portfolios not only using words, but with photos, schematics, maps, and transitions to really keep the reader engaged. And in 2021, we published our first story maps for the FY18 and 19 portfolios with the intent of effectively communicating not only to Congress, but to our stakeholders and the general public. And we weren't too sure if these efforts were going to be well received, but it is safe to say we were successful and it was well received. And we did, again, receive a lot of positive feedback on these reports, including a nice pat on the back from Dr. Gary Matlock, the DAA of Science for OER. It's directly quoted on the slide below. All right, next slide, please. All right, so as more portfolios have been added to our program, we've continued the creation of these story maps to really communicate and bring awareness to what the appropriated funds are supporting. And our most recently published story map is for the DRSA portfolio. When we created the FY18 and 19 story map shown in the previous slide, all the projects were well into their work, completing milestones and producing results some had already finished. So we were able to highlight the major successes of certain projects. So lots of cool plots, cool graphics, things like that. But with the DRSA story map, we took a different approach because when we started this one, the projects under this portfolio were at the very beginning stages of their work. So we were unable to highlight any research successes. So one difference in this story map is that we decided to highlight 4 project managers that demonstrated great success in the previous portfolios and are leading efforts in the DRSA. So you'll see on this slide, we did highlight Abhishek Mehra for his great successes within and across all of our portfolios. And additionally, in this particular story map, we did bring light to the research to operations transitions that will take place under these funds, particularly the forecast model upgrade implementations. So last point is, one great thing about this platform is that it's living in a sense, meaning it can be updated at any point and does not need to go through any sort of republishing. So now that the DRSA work is underway, we would like to highlight research progress as well. So if you have work under DRSA and want to share your cool research accomplishments so far, feel free to reach out to the team and we will work with you. So next slide. With that, I'm going to pass the baton off to Chris to talk about HPC.
So thanks, Renee. So I drew the short stick, and I will be highlighting our role in managing HPC. So currently, our team is tracking approximately 65 million core hours per month of HPC across 4 portfolios, which this is a little misleading because those hours are currently in the FY18 and 19 portfolios. However, this will be increasing soon as the HPC comes online for DRSA. So you can see on the slide that there's 85 million core hour per month requirement for the DRSA portfolio. So now I'm just going to go over some of our responsibilities and helping to manage the HPCs. Definitely, it's a team effort. So we coordinate HPC requirements and we monitor the resources for all the portfolios, well, the 18, 19, and 22 or DRSA. So some of you have received taskers, mainly from Ben, over the last 6 to 9 months, asking for your requirements for DRSA. Would you need access to the cloud, any storage needs? So that information is then passed along to the allocation committee. And recently, we actually sat down with some of you to discuss any updated needs, and we sat down with project managers, portfolio managers to get a gauge of if you would be able to use the cloud, or and some of the things that came out of that is that some projects were actually having issues with storage. So again, we passed this information on to the allocation committee, and we work closely with this committee. We provide recommendations of mitigation for our portfolio, as well as go to bat for the DRSA projects and portfolios. Another thing is we want to make sure we match projects and project managers to the appropriate HPC resources. I like to think of us as quarterbacks or point guards. So we can't help you get on the cloud. We can't give you the storage, but we can facilitate this. We can put you in contact with people that can. And then finally, what has been talked about a little is that we report on a quarterly basis up to NOAA leadership. So one of the biggest risks for our projects is, well, aside from DA scientists, is HPC availability and access. So after each quarterly project review, the team synthesizes all this information and we report up to NOAA leadership on the portfolio as a whole. And as has been stated and what was discussed yesterday, we all know that HPC is a NOAA-wide issue. So NOAA leadership is very keen and like, focused on this risk. And it's probably the biggest risk to our project's success. So something that's new for the DRSA is that we will have our own dedicated HPC portfolio. And Kevin Garrett is the portfolio manager. So hopefully this will help us manage, more easily manage the resources in the DRSA and better track these resources. So we're just now beginning the process to identify how to provide allocations to the DRSA portfolio. And another thing is the Gaia C6 will help fill the gap between the FY18 and 19 resources and the DRSA requirements. So hopefully in the next 3 to 5 months is what we're hearing that the Gaia C6 system will come online. So just quickly wanted to highlight, like more specifically, some of the hurricane needs for DRSA. So you can see on the screen, 27 million core hours per month were requested, and another 1,760 terabytes of storage was requested. I know it's been highlighted multiple times this week, but I figured I'll highlight it again because I think it's a phenomenal success. But one of our projects leveraged the AWS cloud, so the HAFS ensemble for 2023. This came together quickly, as has been discussed this week, and I think it can be a good case or good example for other projects that might want to utilize the cloud if resources are available and if the price is right. So, so finally, it's not like we don't have enough challenges, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. Currently, we don't have any allocation in the DRSA portfolio. Again, we're taking steps to rectify this. So it will take some time. One of the things that Ben and I want to be of help to our project managers is like we want to make sure that we're providing sufficient assistance to all project managers or projects to make sure you have the access to resources that you need. Again, we can't get you on the cloud, but we can put you in contact with folks like Radica or Gonzalo Lashley and team who have more knowledge in this realm and can actually get you to where you want to be. So something that we've learned in the last 6 to 9 months as Ben and I have become more and more involved with the HPC and HPC process is that the software engineering support is a barrier to utilizing the cloud. And so something we didn't really know much about. So putting on our communication manager's hat on again, through our newsletters, we have been communicating with folks that, hey, there is some assistance to maybe help guide folks to where they need to be. So that's come in the form of office hours, which are held on a biweekly basis. And then finally, some DRSA projects are continuing on from FY18 and 19 projects. So they already have somewhat of a dedicated HPC lane. So once 18 and 19 projects have completed, those resources have been released and freed up. So some projects have been able to leverage those resources. However, there are a group of projects, namely the extreme precipitation projects, that don't have that dedicated HPC avenue. So it will be a challenge matching those folks up to the resources they need, especially since a handful of those projects are extremely heavy HPC users. So that takes us to the end of our talk. So thank you, and I think we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
And Renee's still on the line, I hope. So the three of us can take any questions that you might have. We might not have the answer, but we'll take the question. But you know, the HPC, as Chris said, that is a really tough one, and that can get very technical as we're learning. And sometimes that software engineering support is even just for on-prem. It's not just related to getting on the cloud. But again, open it up to the group. Chris and I will be roving mics, right?
Ben, we do have Mark Vincent on the line with his hand up.
Oh, okay, excellent. Go ahead. We'll start with Mark.
Just a comment, you know, these supplementals, you know, we see in the news how hard just passing a regular budget is. And so to pass these supplementals, there's really a sense of urgency from Congress about the impacts of these disasters to real people, you know, and I know several people who have been impacted by these. So when Congress passes these, they have a sense of urgency for NOAA to deliver results. And it's challenging because it's a compressed time period to stand up, you know, identify what the priorities are, stand up the project, do the grants, etc. And with this expectation from Congress to, you know, what did you know, we gave you $50 million. What are the tangible results you delivered? So it's really a paradox, and it's tough. And I want to really give a shout out to HFIP, because when these supplementals have come up, they've had their strategic and implementation plan shovel ready to hit the ground running.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. That is so true. And we know how important the supplementals have been to HFIP and their ongoing research. Other questions, either online or in the room? Yeah. Frank, I thought you might have a question.
Well, first I want to thank you, Mark, and Chris, and Renee for the support you gave us as program managers. Thank you for that. One question, and I think, Chris, you kind of alluded to it, besides the software engineering that was raised up to management, was the data assimilation issue. Have we gotten any traction or any feedback, you know, Tiger team development of getting DA folks or support to go and get more DA folks? Where are we at on that?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Frank. So yeah, we've run this up the chain. Mitch Goldberg, before he retired, and think, well, Kevin was still at Nessus, they had a couple of ideas of bringing in younger DA scientists. But other than that, there hasn't been much movement on that end. Obviously, there are a ton of challenges. Like,
Do I have to call Mike Morgan? Well, I'll call him.
Yeah, but yeah, not much movement, Frank, unfortunately. A lot of headwinds there.
I would just add, we are not alone in that. The DA shortage or lack of being able to, yeah, it's not any one area, but and there was talk, I think even maybe Avishel had the idea, maybe trying to train some of their own DA scientists, or it was getting the model coupling expertise to go with the DA. So it is a complicated thing. I'm not trying to pose as an expert there, but that is something that we try to track, but it's systemic within NOAA, to be honest. So that is a bigger nut to crack. Other questions? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, hi, Mark DeMaria. I was involved when I was with the Weather Service a little bit on some of the early supplementals when they came in. Like one of them went to increase the funding for like accelerate HFIP. So at that time, when there was a supplemental, like the line office heads like helped to set the priorities. And you probably covered this already, but could you just kind of remind everyone, like how are the priorities set? Like you get a supplemental for a broad category, and then you have to decide, you know, where to put the emphasis in that broad category. And I was just curious, you know, how those decisions are made.
Yeah, and I think Mark has his hand up, so I'll defer. I was going to try to answer, but Mark, I think you might have the best answer.
It's a very fast-paced process. In some years, you have rumors that there's a supplemental coming, but then it hits and a very short turnaround. So I've been involved in portions of the 18, 19, and the DRSA, and typically the priorities are proposed at the SES level, but then they are vetted through the political appointees all the way up to Dr. Spinrad in a current case, for example, and then they are approved and iterated with Congress. And on the last route, it was a little bit more formalized. It went through a formal board that NOAA has, the Earth System Integration Board, that most of the NOAA assistant administrators sit on. So, it gets these get proposed by top level management with input from the scientific program managers like you're in the room now, but it's eventually cleared by NOAA management, OMB, and DOC.
Yeah, thanks again, Mark. That's an excellent answer. I think, Gopal, did you have a question?
Yeah. Continuing on the DA expertise, actually one of the, because this is involving much beyond the HFIP, there is a dearth for not only modelers, but more in terms of DA. One of the proposals that I've been suggesting is minority institutions, which supports NOAA, should take up, and even in the next HAFS tutorial, whenever we are having to start conducting there with the DA as a basis, basically, and then we could have people go there to teach what is important for the DA program. We have several DA experts here who would be able to contribute towards that effort. It's a win-win situation for all. We can grow the DA talents that way.
Yeah, capacity building, and some of that does take time, but I think that's worth pursuing. Did you have a hand up? Yeah, Chris, can you get a mic to Jonathan Ho?
So I want to say something to Gopal too. So I know this summer we worked together with the student. I think that's one way, but again, capacity building is going to take time to work through the pipeline.
Yeah, I was just going to mention again what I mentioned yesterday. If some of you weren't here, is the DA consortium is one of the bigger investments came out of the priorities for weather research. Strong support from the community. It's a $7 million investment over several years, and has 20% requirement to work with minority serving institutions. So I think that'll be great. It'll take some time, right? So it's not going to solve today's challenges. And I just want to highlight one other thing Mark said about the supplementals being sort of part of some of the sausage making there over the last couple of years. Having the proposals ready to go and just on the shelf is really important, because the turnaround times are usually a day or two. But if you have a solid plan with some of the stats like were mentioned earlier today about the value that the improvements will provide, I mean that really goes a long way.
John, thank you. And one of the things I'd like to encourage WPO and OSTI, if you have inklings, don't just come up with your own ideas for what should be in a supplemental. Come to us. We're ready. We got table ready stuff for you anytime you want. And we greatly appreciate you also using us as reviewers of the proposals that come in. I think that's also been very beneficial. We know you're not experts in the area, but we're willing to work with you.
Yeah, so I apologize if someone asked this, low chance, but I'll say it anyway. I was just came in. One thing I would say, particularly that I've noticed for the WPO proposals in the past, is that it's actually a unique strength that I think is great, where you have the ability, I have not seen this in NOAA, maybe someone else has seen in different funding agencies, that can directly fund private sector. We've had a hard time being able to route money to the private sector. So that's a really nice benefit to have. The downside of that, though, is that sometimes some of the projects have that are operationally oriented, as an example, balloons. There are some operational constraints that really need to go into that, and maybe that can be circumnavigated by what Frank said, where if we're, some of the operational community is a part of the review process, that can be circumvented. But it is an issue, and it has cropped up a couple of times where we have to do deconflict type stuff. So it doesn't always apply. It applies more in the realm of observations, but it's something to keep aware of, and something that I think is fixable. You know, and the companies themselves really aren't to blame, because they really don't know what the operational requirements are. So it's something, though, that internally to know we should probably be more aware of.
Yeah, I think, did Renee want to say anything? Not to put you on the spot, Renee, but you know, I mean, Mark Vincent heads up we kind of recreated divisions within WPO, and Renee splits her time between the supplemental program with Chris and I, but also is in the observations program. And that kind of deals a bit more with the private sector. Did you want to touch on that, Renee?
Sure. I can just speak to it very briefly and then maybe pass it over to Mark if he has any more remarks, because he also sits as the observations program manager. But yes, over in the OBS program, like Joe mentioned, we do fund private sector. We do have the ability to fund private companies. But I'm not sure if you were inferring this, Joe, or not, but were you referring to maybe the supplemental somehow figuring out to pull in the private sector in this way to fund them through any supplemental funding coming down, or just private sector being funded through WPO in general?
Joe, you can just come up to the podium if you want.
Sorry, Joe. I can't see you, so I don't know how far you have to walk.
Yes, no, that's okay. So yeah, I guess I'm referring to very specific instances where there are two, there was a project, I guess, that you guys funded in the last cycle that was the, launching balloons, and there was deconflict issues with the Air Force and NOAA planes. So I was trying not to be extremely specific, but that's extremely specific of what I'm talking about. And, I think it's not necessarily, it's not a criticism of that. I think it's a very positive thing that you can go directly to private sector in some cases, because as I said, it's difficult for us to do that in the research field, the ones that are getting some of these funds. But it needs to, the review process needs to say, okay, hey, look, you just want to drop balloons and hurricanes or launch balloons and hurricanes? Well, hold on. We have planes that fly and all these other things. So I'm just saying, as a very, very friendly reminder, to maybe have an operational, anything that's related to operations and observations, to have either someone that's deeply involved in the research side of it on NOAA, or even better, an operational person that can give you what the red flags might be, so that you don't run into a problem later once it's funded. That's exactly what I'm saying.
This is Mark. I totally agree with you, Joe. And we'd like, I think of it as a community of practice to get the best investments in research. You have to get good requirements. You have to find the researchers that are going to do the work, but there's also very important, the partners, the co-PIs that in many of our projects, we've been fortunate had co-PIs on the proposal that I think could help strengthen that direction you want to go. And then also the reviewers. So, it really takes that whole community of practice to get the requirements and get the best projects. A shameless commercial, but I think WPO Observations has the coolest projects in all of NOAA, as Renee cringes with that. But I'm going to throw in the link to our FY23 funded projects. And we have about 4 or 5 hurricane observation projects in there. So bottom line, Joe, we agree with you, and we look forward to working with this community going forward.
Okay, yeah, who wants to be next? We got, oh yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that when people hear shovel ready, they often think start quickly, but it also means end quickly. So the project has to go up, deliver, and down within the span of usually about 2-3 years. And so no O&M tail. That's typically what gets these projects flagged during the review process, is it has an O&M tail. So it really has to spin up, deliver, and down very fast. If people are thinking about how to be successful in terms of getting the money at these.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're not going to get into it here, but transition plans probably have a place within supplemental projects. We're working on that. I know you had a question, Aaron. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is totally way simpler than what was going on in these discussions, but I wanted to throw it out there back to you, Chris, and Renee, is you guys do an awful lot of work distilling and taking all the information and being able to packetize it to communicate up above where they may or may not be able to dig into the detail. What can we do from our side of that to make it easier for you? What's like one takeaway type thing?
You know, that's a good question. And Chris, jump in if you want, but I mean, the challenge to kind of make it plain language and digestible, that's something we're always kind of thinking in the back of our mind. Of course, anything that's concrete and visual, yeah, that'll play well. But Chris, anything you had to say?
Yeah, you hit on it. So Aaron, with BIL, they're starting early. They're telling us early, hey, break everything down in plain language, provide pictures, but you have to make it relatable to society. And someone said it earlier, I don't know if it was today, but like, what's the benefit? What's the impact? Like, as Mark says, like, would my grandma understand what work you did? So she's 95. So, but yeah, just try to break it down as much as possible. Renee, I don't know if you have anything on that.
No, nothing else to add. Really, the visualization is key. Sometimes we get reports that don't have any supplemental graphics or anything like that. So it can be kind of hard to really communicate those accomplishments, because when you have just a short amount of time to communicate something really big, words on a slide, and that be the only thing on the slide, is kind of hard to really get someone excited about. So I would say visualization is key. If you could provide, if you want to, it's not required. Like, if with the visualization, just like a brief summary or something like that in plain language. But I would say visualization is top.
Thank you, Renee. I want to thank Ben, Renee, Chris, and Mark for that session. I know it can be a little dry talking about supplemental money and so forth, but I think we had a good discussion, and it shows you how it all ties together, especially the last part about getting our message up. If we can't let leadership know what we want in a way they can understand it, we're never going to get what we want anyhow. So with that, I want to transition to our next session and hand the floor over to Chandra Kandragunta for JTTI.
Thank you, Aaron. As Aaron said, my name is Chandra Kandragunta. I'm the JTTI program manager. So this is the first time for me here in person. I've been attending
You should be able to.
for the last 2-3 times. This is the first time. Thanks for inviting me for the Aaron and the organizing committee. So I'm going to do this session slightly differently from what Ben and Chris did. I'm going to give you an overview of JTTI first, and then we'll have the PIs come and make the presentations about their work, basically. That's how I planned it. So I'll just start with my presentation. So the title of my presentation is the Joint Technology Transfer Initiative, Building a Bridge to Transition Research from the Weather Enterprise to the NWS operations. So I would like to acknowledge my contributors. Basically, they're working on my team, Aaron Pratt and also Walbona Kunkel. They both are from the Federators. And also, I would like to acknowledge the Weather Service collaborators. And this is the Research to Operations Transition Program. Without Weather Service itself, we couldn't have done this one. So, but there are a lot of people in the Weather Service we work with on day-to-day basis, like for projects and point of contacts. And it is just not possible to list everybody, every project point of contact. So what I decided was just to list a few people which have been working from the beginning of the program, like Hendrik Tolman. He was the line office transition manager when I started this program. And after that, I think down the road around 2018, 19 timeframe, Weather Service or Office of Science and Technology created a research to operations division, basically. So, and then Nicole Korkowski and Wendy Sellers are part of the division. So I work with them on a weekly basis, sometimes monthly basis, basically for anything coming to requirements, transition plans, and they help JTTI. So I would like to acknowledge their contribution. Okay, so this is the outline of my talk. Basically, I just briefly give a background of the JTTI mission, and I talk about the JTTI implementation, and I talk about the current status of the JTTI projects, and then probably some of you may be interested in knowing what the funding opportunities are for the next couple of years. And then I'll talk about actually a list of the hurricane JTTI funded hurricane projects, because I'm not going to go into details of all the projects because the PIs will come and present some of the projects, and then finally summarize the talk. This is the background of JTTI. JTTI was created by the US Congress in FY16 with a $6 billion in the OIR budget. Basically, it is not in the president's budget. Congress created this, and I was named the founding manager for this program. Initially, we thought it was a $6 million maybe earmarked, but then FY17 we got 7 million, 10 million, and then 20 million, and now and the program, there is a history. But also in FY17, this program became a part of the Weather Act. So that really gave some kind of legitimacy to the program. The mission is, I think I'm going to try to explain this a little bit in the wake of the comments we got from yesterday. The mission is continuous development and cost-effective transition of the latest scientific and technological advances into the NWS operations while working in close coordination with the National Weather Service and in cooperation with the American Weather Enterprise. Basically, what it says, continuous development and cost-effective transition. Continuous development means basically it's not talking about research, it's just talking about development and then transition, okay? If you look at the RL spectrum, we have like 4 phases, like research, development, demonstration, and then operations. So basically, this program is about development and then demonstration, basically. So continuous development, cost-effective transition. What that means is, remove the legacy systems. NOAA has a habit of keeping the legacy systems, like we have a quilt of all the models. So basically, what it's saying that sunset the legacy systems, implement the new ones, and then keep going. That's what it means, okay? So basically, the charge is, and we all know that transition research to operations is not an easy task. So this national NIS study alluded that to the crossing the valley of death. So basically, the charge here is crossing the valley of death to the JTTI. Okay, so I'll come to that. Thank you. So this is the JTTI implementation. Implementing JTTI, we are guided by the NAO, NOAA Administrative Order 2016 NO5B. This NOAA Administrative Order sets a policy on the research and development transition in NOAA. According to this NAO, a research to operations transition plan is recommended for all the projects above readiness levels 4. For JTTI, we made it as a requirement. So we just made it more stringent. A couple of other things we did was fostering a collaboration between the R&D entity and the operational entity early in the transition process, and tracking the progress of the transition plan using readiness level. So for fostering collaboration, what we did was, at the time of proposal development itself, we asked the potential PIs to identify a receiving office in the Weather Service and their collaborator. Basically, the collaborator becomes a point of contact. So as soon as the project is funded, we assign a point of contact from the other service for the project who kind of guides through the transition process till it is transition. So for tracking the progress, we use readiness level. And readiness levels have been around for a long time. A lot of people do not know that. DOD has been using it for a long time. The NASA has been using, and the NOAA, we adopted from the NASA. And they were in the NAO. The first NAO was signed in 2008. And nobody touched them until I came to the JTTI, and I brought them out. And then I used the readiness levels to track the transition of the progress of the transition projects. Of course, there are a lot of issues, a lot of confusion, a lot of people are not aware of this. So we had to do some work, and then I think Annette is not here. We had a readiness level task force, and around a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, to expand the definition of RLs, so everybody in NOAA and the community understand that. Okay, so but going forward, you will see how these transition the readiness levels are useful in tracking the transition projects. So the right side, what you see is the spectrum of readiness levels. As you can see, as I think I have already mentioned, a transition project goes into the 4 phases before it becomes operational: research, development, demonstration, and deployment. Okay, I should have corrected this. Basically, initially, JTTA focused on readiness levels 4 to 8. Recently, we have went down all the way to 3 because it's also still in development phase. So basically, the JTTI funds project from RL3 to RL8. Okay, so this slide shows the transition projects. JTTI is a leader in developing the transition plans. So, I mean, we have several. This is kind of almost a year old. We have almost like 75%, 80% of projects have transition plans. So this is the current status of our JTTI projects. As you can see from the pie chart, the interdisciplinarity of the JTTI, we have funded projects in several disciplines. To date, we have funded 155 projects. Out of that, 119 are from the external community, the academic community, and private sector. So this is what I wanted to. Somebody asked about the question about funding the private sector. So JTTI funded 10 projects in private sector. And then we also have internal competition. We funded NOVA scientists. Those are 36 projects. And so far, we have 20 transitions. These 20 include 2 from the social and behavioral sciences, 2 from the AI, machine learning, and 2 from the private sector. So this is what I want to emphasize, because this is the first time in NOVA, a private sector company can transition research to operations directly. And also the first time in NOVA, a non-NOVA affiliated institution, like a non-cooperative institute, academic institution, research can be transitioned to operations. So these 2 things are the success of JTTI. Transitions have been happening before, but those are happening through cooperative institutes and to NOVA labs and then to the operations. But this is what JTTI did, was helping the community, basically. So this slide shows how JTTI enables the weather ready nation. Basically, what I did was I divided the entire forecast process, the entire gamut of the forecast process, into 3 frameworks: observational framework, modeling framework, and products and services framework. The boxes that are highlighted in
You've got about 5 more minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. The boxes that are highlighted in purple color are the way the JTTI activities are. JTTI funded those activities, and the boxes that are in the blue color are the NWS operational entities. So as you can see, JTTI has a role in almost every framework, basically enabling almost 2 of the 3 weather ready nation goals, which is one is integrating science into the operations, science and technology into the operations. Other one is IDSS, basically. And also, I would like to draw your attention to the last, the products and services framework. JTTI funded so many probabilistic projects, basically, and also the facets, a lot of facets projects. Basically, JTTI significantly advanced the probabilistic framework, which Ken Graham is talking about. So JTTI runs 2 types of competitions, internal and external. I'll just talk for the external competitions. We use the notice of funding opportunity. But the external competitions, the external peers can only take a project to so much that they can't put it in the operations. In the end, ultimately, a NOVA scientist has to work on and put it in the operations. That is why we have internal competition. Basically, these are internal competitions are for the PIs, NOVA scientists, who take the projects which are at higher readiness level, probably previously funded by other research programs, like RL 6 and 7 at that level, and take those projects, test in the test beds, and then maybe operational, pre-operational testing, and then put it in the operations. So we basically, JTTI uses 2 types of internal and external competitions. So probably this is what some of you are looking for, the future funding opportunities. I would like to draw your attention to the disclaimer in the top, subject to availability of appropriated funds. Basically, whatever this is all in the early planning stage. Nothing can be done until we have an appropriated fund. So I want you to keep that in mind. So there is a FY25 funding cycle coming up. That is for internal NOVA scientists. Announcement date is around third quarter of FY24. Start date, of course, it is variable, but it could be a third quarter of 25. Eligibility is basically federal scientists from OER labs and NWS centers and operational units. Okay, I'll come to that again. There is another caveat to it. So eligibility readiness levels are readiness of 6 and above on any previously funded projects by JTTI, any NOFO projects, or any supplemental projects. Any projects that are at RL6 are eligible to apply for funding. And then the areas of interest are just like we loosely put that weather modeling, post-processing, IDSS, and coastal coupling. Funding period could be 2 to 3 years. Funding amount we can change. It was like initially we thought 500K, but after we had a weather program, had a review in the January. So they kind of recommended that you guys, instead of supporting piecemeal projects, try to fund big projects, So I think we're thinking of that, funding maybe bigger projects around 500K to 1 million projects. So this is what I want to draw your attention to, proposal structure. So we would like to have these proposals to be joint proposals between OER labs, and these proposals have to have NWS partner. These are R2O projects. Without NWS partner, you cannot transition this to operations. So you won't be even eligible if you don't have NWS partner. You will just reject the proposal right away. And we would like to you collaborate with the academic institutions. That is basically we are looking for a big joint proposals between OER labs, NWS with NWS partnership, and then academic institutions. And then, of course, FY26, we are planning on the notice of funding opportunity for the external community, but then it is still farther away. Okay, so these are some of the projects we funded so far. There are actually 11 projects funded. I don't have time to go over, but the first project I want to highlight is improving use of drop zones in NOVA operations. Our own Jason Sipper, he gave the first transition, not very first, Jason and Avichal. Both of them, thank you. I don't have your photos to put just like the other one, but thank you for giving early transitions. I mean, that is really helpful for JTTI. And we have 11 projects total, and some of the PIs are going to talk today in this session. I think I'll skip all those things. You can see for yourself. Okay, so this finally, just in summary, JTT has built a bridge to transition interdisciplinary research from the American Weather Enterprise to the NWS operations based on 4 foundational pillars: fostering early collaboration, assigning NWS transition POC for transition projects, developing end-to-end transitional plans, and using readiness levels to track their transition progress. So far, JTT had transitioned 20 R2O projects. I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much. Okay, I think so. Next, we'll go with the JTTI project presentations. So the first one is by Chair Kova. She will talk about the machine learning model to improve the NHC tropical cyclone intensity guidance.
Right. And you don't want to give the road. So issues, bigger arrow. You need to go back. It's the little one.
Okay.
You need the laser pointers. The one on.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about improving NHC operational intensity guidance suite and situational awareness with better metrics of ocean TC interaction. And I list their collaborator and operational partners for this project. So outline, talk about why we want to improve statistical dynamical TC intensity forecast model, how TC interaction is represented in TC ocean interaction is represented in operational models, what we can improve, what data we use, and discuss some of the current results that we have.
Thank you, Frank.
things. So motivation, statistical dynamical models, SHIPS and ALGEM are still skillful and contribute to consensus models. Consensus models are usually the best. So here we plotted the 5-year verification of SHIPS and ALGEM compared to other models. And it's even by itself, they still look competitive. There is a lot of tools, especially rapid intensification tools and existing and new consensus models, which keep using these models. So ocean TC interaction. I'm going to talk very briefly about a couple of changes which were made in the last couple of years, but that to operational models, but that is like really important to what we're doing here. So SHIPS and ALGEM been using for years empirical SST cooling, and last year that was removed and replaced by predictors used to predict SST cooling. You can look at this table later, slides will be available, but it basically shows like a mix of different predictors like potential intensity, SST, with and without SST cooling, ocean heat content, all of that mixed in the models. And here are shown the changes which were made last year. And that did produce some improvement for both SHIPS and ALGEM for Atlantic and East Pacific. And maybe more interested in, it did remove some biases, some long-term biases in ALGEM. Again, the main thing was that it kind of like streamlined it, that instead of using a model inside the model, it just directly uses all predictors. So the main thing we're trying to do in this project is we're trying to investigate the use of ocean dynamic temperature in statistical and machine learning models. So I think all of you probably well familiar with ocean heat content. So why we want to look at dynamic temperature? So dynamic temperature is there a pointer here?
The laser pointer right here.
Okay, so dynamic temperature is basically just average of ocean temperature over upper layer of depth L. And the big question is how you define what is that L. And in the literature, there are all different kind of definitions, starting with simple saying, okay, let's just use like 80 meters or 100 meters, which is representative for roughly hurricane of category 3. And Balaguru and Foltz developed this physical expression, which actually tries to estimate that mixing depth from using the ocean stability and the storm parameters. So what is important here is that TDY depends on storm intensity, on storm translational speed, and storm size. And unlike OHC, it explicitly accounts for ocean stability, which would determine the depth of a mixing. Now, that represents a challenge. How do we use that in statistical model? So we had to do kind of like I think we rewrote that like 3 times, the whole database, to figure out how to implement that so that we can quickly estimate this in real time, so something that could be done in operations and could be used in the model. And these are technical details which probably be mostly interested to TSB branch, but the important thing here is that we basically replaced, like currently statistical model use encode the ocean database, and we completely redid all this pre-processing. We eliminated huge intermediate ASCII files, and now we can recreate whole developmental database from 82 to current like 2022 in a few hours, and before that required a couple months of computations. And we also redid how all averages are calculated. So now we're using Barnes interpolation instead of just 4-point interpolation, and that could easily handle different input data sets and different grid, and missing data is much more robust. And finally, we added full temperature and salinity encoder profiles to SHIPS LS-DIAC files. So what that gives us, now we have a huge database of the ocean data, and we can explore it in all different kind of ways. So here I'm going to focus on results which we got with modifying operational SHIPS and ALGEM. So the first step, we just tried to add there several simple measures of depth average temperature, assuming constant mixing depth from 25 meters to 200 meters. And what this show us, it's a little bit surprising results. Frankly, I don't know how to interpret it. But basically what we show is that the deeper we go, the better improvement we're getting, at least for the dependent sample test. So this at the top, that is the using 200 meter depth mixing length for depth average temperature. So we kept that predictor and this MD40 at 200 meters. And we also looked at several versions of dynamic TDY. And it turned out the most promising in this, where we use actual Vmax at time 0, translational speed estimated from real data, and for size, we currently use constant size of 50 kilometers. So, and we added these 3 predictors to SHIPS and LGEM. We're getting quite a bit of improvement for both SHIPS and LGEM, not huge, but it is statistically significant for both Atlantic and East Pacific. So, and we're also getting similar results for rapid intensification. So here are some improvements. It's showing that very significant improvement with adding salinity and constant TDY at 80 meter constant depth to RI, but we do need to run more tests with that. So the new predictors are significant, and in fact we show, so here is SST just for reference, but we show that our new predictors are more significant compared to many other predictors. Many other predictors use it in SHIPS and LGEM, and these are the results for SHIPS, and we're getting something very similar for LGEM. So we did reruns. It's not completely independent. It's somewhat independent for 2013, 2022, and we got quite a bit of improvement for the Atlantic. Something bad happens to East Pacific after roughly 48 hours. It does, so it improves originally for SHIPS when it gets worse, which is kind of, usually it's much easier to improve Atlantic than East Pacific than Atlantic. So that is something we have to look at, and similar results for LGEM. We are getting quite a bit of improvement for the Atlantic. It does get worse for the East Pacific, but it improves to 2% for up to 72 hours for East Pacific. It does get worse after that. So obviously we don't want to put this in operation, so we'll looking at figuring out what is happening here. And just a couple of things is, so I just put the plots of sea surface temperature versus 2 different versions of depth average temperature which we're using. And this is SST, it's called T01 because it's the upper level of our temperature profile. And so, and this is our dynamic temperature, and this is temperature with constant mixing depth of 200 meters. So 2 things to note here. First is that there is no one-to-one correlation between SST and depth average temperature. So they do provide different information. And another thing, if you look at this relationship between Atlantic and East Pacific, they are different. They're not like hugely different, but they're different. So which suggests that some of the processes could be different in Atlantic and East Pacific. And here is the same thing for OHC. This is OHC on this side, and on X is again dynamic temperature and a constant temperature at 200 meters. And again, we see the same thing. OHC and depth average temperature are not one-to-one correlated. So by looking at depth average temperature, we can get additional information, which is probably not provided by OHC. And we also questions if there is some information in deeper layers, which could actually affect the intensification. So, we currently have all of these variables available on the RAMB0 slider. It's in real time. We're plotting these 4 variables and the SST cooling, which is the difference between SST and depth average temperature. And we also have it available in AVIPS2. This data been provided to Joint Typhoon Warning Center for, I think, almost 2 years now, and I know they're looking at it. We're ready to provide it to NHC. I think NHC is waiting for our model results before they tell us if they want this data. So summary and future work. So we did develop that database of ocean data. We did demonstrate that the predictors are important and can provide significant improvement for ships and LGEM. We're going to tweak it and see if we can get better improvement for ships and LGEM. And finally, we're working on the last part of that project, which is exploring the machine learning version. So once we happy with the predictors, we're going to see if we can do the same thing with adding neural network instead of linear regression, if that could further improve it. And we're running with real-time demonstrations, and we also have this data set available in AWEBS 2 for operational centers who might be interested in it. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Next one is.
L2, could you check your mic real quick while we switch slides?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I don't think my video is working, but you know, it's always 50-50. So anyway, hi everyone. It's good to be at least virtually with you all. I couldn't travel this year, but in fact, I haven't been back to Miami for the last 5 years. You know, my office used to be at AOML on the 3rd floor. But you know, I moved to Maryland, so now I'm remote. Anyway, the title of our project is, and this is a multi-institutional collaborative project. It's integration of a fully functional atmospheric UFS HAFS into JEDI with weekly coupled ocean data assimilation capability. And I am the lead PI at University of Miami. And my co-PIs are John Potterjoy from Maryland and Shuguang Wang from Oklahoma. And of course, we work very closely with the EMC HAFS DA team. So next slide, please. Just quickly to go over our project goals and objectives. And this is really, the 3 goals are tailored for the 3 universities to tackle. The first goal is to establish a mature JEDI-based data assimilation system for the atmospheric component of HAFS. The second part is to perform R&D to implement all-sky GO-16 satellite radiance data assimilation capabilities into HAFS. And finally, to integrate online radiance bias correction capabilities and new ensemble data assimilation strategies into fully cycled basin-wide HAFS analyses. You know, we got funded in 2022. And so, you know, we've had about a year into our project. I should also mention that the 3 of us from the 3 universities were funded by the FY19 supplemental project, you know, where we worked closely with the HAFS team to develop some of the technical capabilities. You know, and some of these things that I will present were actually developed, you know, within that project, but in a more of a research mode. And now we're trying, you know, our goal is to bring this up to the operational level so that these can be used by the HAFS DA system in operations in the coming versions. Next slide, please. So one of the first big accomplishments for us this year has been to put together a basin-wide cycled data assimilation system. This is quite different from the current operational configuration of HAFS for both A and B, because, you know, from a DA perspective, they are very similar. And you can see on the right on the image that kind of the pink domain, the big pink domain is where our research version of cycled HAFS DA system is centered. It's a single domain with a 2 or 3 kilometer control and a 6 kilometer ensemble configuration. So in the second bullet there, you can see that because we don't have an inner domain or a moving nest, anything like that, there's no need for complicated inner domain mechanics or any artificial or numerical multi-domain interactions. So it's a very clean data assimilation / modeling system. It naturally covers most of the NHC area of responsibility without necessarily having to focus on individual storms. It's very straightforward for us to implement augmented ensemble covariance information. And by augmented, I mean the half-cycled HAFS ensemble, in addition to the GDAS ensemble, the GFS ensemble that we can bring in and put them together. And it also allows for consistency to carry out clear error radiance data assimilation as well as bias correction, because for bias correction, radiance bias correction, you need as large of a domain as possible to consistently calculate the biases. So this type of domain configuration gives us that advantage. Next slide, please. One accomplishment that we're carrying over from our previous project, but now we actually have implemented in a research version of HAFS, is something that we developed at HRD that we call online quality control. So there's multiple things that online quality control takes advantage of. The first one is that it accounts for both observation uncertainty and background model uncertainty when it tackles the quality control. It normalizes the OMBs, the observation minus background differences, by this total uncertainty, so that the quantity that we quality control for is something normalized. And that gives us an advantage because we can treat all of the observations equally and all at once. And we're also using a robust technique to carry out the quality control, which is non-parametric. In other words, it doesn't rely on any type of assumption, statistical assumption. So next slide, please. So on the left, the box 1 is where you see how the QC, this online QC procedure, operates on all of the inner core observations at once, because we're talking about normalized innovations. That's in the x-axis. So all temperature, wind, all these observations are put together. All TDR, SFMR, flight level, they're all put together. And then the red, tails are deemed outliers. The number 2 is the original QC that was in GSI. And on the left, you see, the wind observations for the Altius SUAS, and on the right for the flight level. And you see that because the original QC doesn't operate on normalized innovation, but it has to operate on the native innovation. So in other words, it's meters per second on the x-axis. And you see that what gets quality controlled as an outlier is all over the place, even for very, very small innovations. Some of them can be deemed outliers. But when you look at the top, when we do this in normalized space and then transferred over into native space, now you can see that we really capture more of the actual outlier innovations. So, we feel that this will be, a big addition to HAFS over the long term. Next slide, please. So this is coming from the Maryland group. The first thing is their non-Gaussian ensemble data assimilation capability. They tested a local particle filter as a replacement for the ENKF in HAFS. And then they ran a 3-week experiment from back in 2020 to show that there were forecast improvements over the traditional ENKF VAR data assimilation system that was already in HAFS. And in the figures you see, the blues are the original ENKF VAR system, and the reds are the particle filter VAR system that they replaced it with. And you can see the drop in the errors as well as the improvement in the dashed lines in the ensemble spread, which is another thing that you want from an ensemble-based system, to have your errors and your ensemble spread to be as consistent as possible. So they were able to achieve both of these goals with this, particle filter that they tried. Next slide, please. I will do my best. 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is online radiance bias correction, again, from University of Miami, Maryland. This is again from a 5-week test that they did in research mode in HAFS. And, where you see in the control, no online, the default bias correction versus in the blue, the online bias correction. And so, this is only achievable in the big domain that I was talking about. So this also speaks to the importance of that. Next slide, please. This is from the OU group. The first accomplishment from the first year is the hydrometeor vortex relocation capability. Chuguang actually talked about this also yesterday, but this is this was within the context of our project, so I wanted to mention it here again. This is just a basic capability that's needed so that you can do satellite data assimilation, because if you're not carrying over or relocating hydrometeors, there's no way you can properly calculate radiances based on those hydrometeors. So this is a big capability that they added to HAFS. And next slide, please. And then this is their all-sky radiance data assimilation preliminary results. In the red, you see for MSL PVmax and track errors, the no radiance data assimilation. In the green, you see just the raw all-sky radiance data assimilation. There's slight, in fact, degradation in the forecast quality, but then they also introduced adaptive bias correction and adaptive observation error capabilities, which is in the blue line. And then they have seen really big improvements when they, assimilated all sky radiances. So next slide.
You have to wrap it up, please.
Okay, almost done. So another part of our project is transitioning to JEDI, and in the red you see where we are, with HAFS. We're targeting HAFS v3, but no timeline. This was discussed in great detail yesterday, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we have a half FTE to work on this. Next slide, please. We also have a research to operations transition plan that we have submitted to the JTTI program office for review. which encompasses both the mixed ensemble capability, the all SkyGo 16 DA capability, as well as transitioning of capabilities to JEDI. So, and then finally, this slide is just a list of publications and presentations that came out of our project so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Altrek. We'll move on to the next one. The next one is by Zaiza Apur. She talks about DA of ground-based Doppler radar and airborne Doppler radar data simulation.
So should I go here? On the green. Oh, okay. So this will forward. Right? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Zhaoxia Pu, and I'm professor of University of Utah. We got support from JTTA program to work on the data simulation for landfalling hurricane. So I'm going to highlight some of the results from our FY19 funding. So just give a background, as we all know, so there have been significant progress has been made with the HFIP program to improve the rapid intensification and also the track forecast for the hurricane, but there have been nice progress made for the landfalling hurricane. So this motivates us to work on the data simulation and the model improvement for the improved landfalling hurricane forecast. So for the project funded by JTTA, we have made 3 tasks. The first one is to develop effective method to assimilate the coastal region ground-based Doppler radar observation, and secondly, to integrate the Doppler 1 LiDAR and the Thai Doppler radar data together for the inner core data simulation. And then lastly, so we improved the PBL scheme by performing a large-eddy simulation. So we made 3 translations for all these 3 tasks, and we made the technical notes to the EMC for each of these tasks. I just like to highlight what we did. So for the first task, we assimilate the radial velocity from the coastal next radar into the HWolf model with the GSA. So as you know, this GSA is a hybrid data simulation system. So you may have heard from many people already talk about this. And what we did is we tried to identify the sensitivity parameter in the DA system and make suggestion for the best configuration, which could lead to the best DA and the forecast results from the current configuration of the HWolf model. So we adjust the maximum radiance range for the horizontal coverage of the radar observation. So why we need this is because the current configuration in the operational mostly fit in the convective scale and the other forecast purpose, but not suitable for the hurricane data simulation. So then we made adjustment, and also we did adjust the radial range for the super arbs and the data sending, and work on the vertical and the horizontal localization, and also adjust the weight for the background error covariances, because we see the hybrid background error covariances gives weight between the static and ensemble components. So overall, I think we get a pretty good impact to the forecast. So as you can see, for this is Hurricane Nora, we did assimilate 3 coastal radar, and you can see we get the nice impact on the track and also the intensity improvement. So this is about the ground-based radar data simulation. So the second thing we did is to modify a boundary layer vertical eddy diffusivity parameterization in the HWolf model based on the large eddy simulation. So this one is to give you an idea. So
There are the raw vortices in hurricane boundary name, but the cloud permitting scale cannot be resolve these raw vortices. But with the large eddy simulation, you can clearly see this large eddies and associated with these raw vortices. And so then we use this large eddy simulation overcome and modify the PBL scheme and try to get the better what you call eddy diffusivity term. So as you can see here, so this is the first snapshot of the results. So this is the radar observed the inner core structure. So in terms of the maximum wind and without this modification, so you see this inner core is not well represented, especially the height of the maximum wind. But with the modified this vertical diffusivity parameterization, we can get more realistic inner core. And what we did with the HFIP model is to look the HFIP model parameterization scheme, and then so use the statistical fitting to find out this modified this parameter, and then eventually get a modified vertical diffusivity parameter. And so here is the impact you can see from the this is Hurricane Florence. So the black here is the best track, and the blue is the original blue is the original scheme, and so then the green and the red is the modified scheme. You can see how the green curve showing the better intensity forecast here, and also we get the better track forecast as well. So it works, and then the next thing we did is about the combining the Doppler wind radar and the tile Doppler radar observation together for the improved analysis and the prediction of the hurricane. So as we know, the NOAA actually HRD did one step forward. They had the Doppler tile Doppler radar all the time during the hurricane season. So in the year 2016, they also fly to have the Doppler wind radar on board. So the idea here is the Doppler wind, the tile Doppler radar seeing the convective region, and while the Doppler wind radar seeing the clear region. So this is complementary the observance system. So we assimilate this Doppler DWL and also this TDR data together. And what we found is with the integrated data assimilation, we definitely can get the best inner core representation. So the idea here is we found that the integrated data assimilation is different from you assimilating data individually. So in order to get the best results, you got to rework on the quality control for the TDR data and also doing the data syncing for the DWL data. So we have all these people published, so you can check our publication for details, and also you can ask me questions. And so just to wrap up, we have the successful completion of the previous JTTA project. Fortunately, our ongoing project is work with JEDA now, and we collaborate with EMC, and we developed a strongly coupled land atmosphere data simulation system with JEDA and the UFS to improve the mid-range forecast with UFS. So we are there and ready to move to the HAFS with JEDA to implement what we have done previously into the new system. So I think we have publications associated with this project you can check. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Move on to the next one. Thank you. Yeah. We'll move on to the next one. Next one is by Ping Zhu.
This is forward.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Pinzu from Florida International University, and here are my, here are my NOAA collaborators, Junzang, Xuejun, Sammy from HRD, Jianwen Bao from PSL, and Zach from EMC. So as an introduction to this work, while we need a 3D turbulent mixing scheme, so let me make a short brief review over the problems we're attacking. So in the fair weather conditions, the turbulent boundary is cleanly separated from the free atmosphere above by a capping inversion, as illustrated here by the typical CBL, MBL, and SBL. And in all these cases, the vertical turbulent mixing is much stronger than the horizontal mixing. Because of this, and also due to the fact that most parameterizations are parameterized in a one-dimensional vertical column framework, such as microphysics, radiation, it is natural to parameterize vertical turbulent mixing in 1D framework as well, so that different parameterizations can bundle together, known as a model physics package. But so in mesoscale and large scale models, the horizontal and the vertical turbulent mixing is parameterized separately. The former is handled within the model dynamic solver using a relatively simple approach, such as a Smagorinsky scheme. And the later is treated in a standalone module outside the model dynamic solver, known as a PBL scheme, which can be very sophisticated. But this separate parameterization strategy may not work well in a TC environment because of the unique characteristics of vertical turbulent mixing in the inner core. So the left panel here shows the observed and simulated potential temperature profile in the eye wall in Earl, Patricia, and Ida. As you can see, despite different hurricanes developed under different conditions, the theta profile in the eye wall is very consistent in the entire troposphere, in which no inversion exists to separate the boundary from the free atmosphere above. The middle and right panel shows the LiDAR retrieved the TKE in Hurricane Rita and the composite TKE from many hurricanes. As you can see, large TKEs in the eye wall throughout the troposphere. Again, in this case, no physical interface to separate the turbulence generated by the boundary processes and the cloud process above. The complication is that the unique vertical turbulent mixing is also complicated by the horizontal mixing. The left panel shows a snapshot of a cross-section at the outer edge of the eye wall from a large AD simulation of Hurricane Isabel. As indicated by the black arrow, the large turbulent ADs experience large lateral contrast across the edge of the eye wall, which is comparable to the vertical gradient. And this results in interconnected horizontal and vertical turbulent mixing. Using the LS output, we calculated the TKE shear production, and the result shows that there is a large difference between 3D shear production and 1D shear production in the vicinity of the eye wall. The vertical profile clearly shows that the 3D TKE shear production nearly doubles the value of a 1D shear production. This suggests that the turbulent mixing in the inner core of TC needs to be parameterized three-dimensionally. And this is particularly true when model grid resolution increases to the gray zone. As we know, large turbulent ADs are anisotropic, but the small ADs are generally considered to be isotropic. And then for model with a low resolution, and then the vertical and horizontal turbulent mixing generated by large anisotropic ADs are currently parameterized by the separated parameterizations that I mentioned before. But what about the turbulent mixing in the gray zone, where turbulent ADs possess both isotropic and anisotropic characteristics? So in this case, the separated parameterization strategy becomes problematic because the turbulent mixing is really a three-dimensional. So to relax the problem, and thanks to the support by the JDTI program, we are currently developing a scaleware 3D TKE turbulence scheme to treat the turbulence mixing in the gray zone. Our method is to transition a 3D TKE scheme at the LAS limit to a 1D TKE scheme at the MS limit using a blending method proposed by Zhang et al. 2018. So we have successfully implemented the first version of our scheme in HAFS, and the scheme has 3 unique features. First is it considers 4 3D shear production tensor consisting 9 terms. In contrast to the 1D TKE scheme, it only considers 2 terms that involves the vertical gradient of horizontal winds. And the second, the scheme considers 3D TKE turbulent transport and the pressure correlation, in contrast to 1D TKE scheme, in which only the TKE turbulent transport and the pressure correlation in the vertical is considered. And the third is that the vertical and horizontal turbulent mixing are now parameterized in a consistent way based on the prognostically predicted TKE. So using the HAFS with our schemes, we simulated a Hurricane Ida, and this figure compares the simulated storm track and intensity compared with observations. The black line is the best track, and the gray line is the baseline HAFS simulations. The blue, green, red lines are the simulations with our new schemes, but with different combinations of the 3 unique features that I just mentioned. As you can see, the scaleware 3D scheme notably improves the HAFS scale in predicting Ida's rapid intensification and peak intensity. And this figure compares the observed and simulated storm structure. As you can see, there is a well-defined eye wall shown in the satellite image, but this feature is not well produced by the baseline HAFS with default model physics. On the other hand, the storm structure produced by the new 3D schemes is much closer to the observations, including a well-defined eye wall and asymmetrical ring bands. So in summary, our new scaleware 3D scheme shows a promising result to improve HAFS scale in predicting TC intensity, at least for this IDA case. And we just started this work for a year ago. And then for the future work, we will conduct sensitivity tests to evaluate the scaleware 3D schemes for various resolution settings, where we simulate historical hurricanes cases with different intensities and evaluate HAFS performance against observations. And based on these tests, we will further tune and refine the schemes. And in the 3rd year, we are proposing to do the real-time test. This is basically our goal. Thank you. This is all I have.
Thank you, Pingzu. Okay, so time for the questions. So questions for any of us on the program? Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you were asking the question.
There are a couple of questions that came in on the chat. Bashir had one for L2. Has any surface observations of simulation been conducted over land? L2, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here. I mean, by that, if the question asks about like surface stations, things like that, yes, of course. Anything that the HAFS data assimilation system assimilates by default also gets assimilated in our experiments.
Bashir, are you on? Did you want to ask any follow-up or clarify anything on the question?
Yes. So this question has a history because with HWRF, there was no DA done over land. And the DA over land is very important for hazard. I'm part of a team. I'm one of the developers of who developed the catastrophe model. And the DA over land is very important. So I think this is a big change from HWRF, where now we have DA over land that can be used for storm damage assessment, for validation studies and things like that. This is really important.
Right, but that would require further verification against those observations at those scales, which I don't think anybody at AMC has done before. But yes, I mean, any observations that exist in the domain do get assimilated.
Hey, this is Jason. I want to make a point of clarification. So we are assimilating NextRad data that's available. We're also assimilating, obviously RayObs, that's upper air, but there's a boundary layer component to that too. And we're also assimilating METAR observations. Of course, operational HAFS, the domain isn't particularly large. It's around the storm. It's not. It's actually smaller than HWRF's domain 2, which also had data assimilation. So we're having probably less of an impact of those kinds of obs overall. We did test Mesonet assimilation also in HWRF, and it had a pretty solid positive impact on the track forecast, track and intensity forecasts. So that's harder operationally because there's things you have to do. The way we did it was kind of in research mode, and so there was a lot you have to do operationally to deal with Mesonet data. So that did not make it in, but at least the METAR component did.
And that's really another argument on our end, on the PI's end, to move toward a larger domain, to take advantage of as many observations as possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So there's somebody.
Hi, I have a question actually for Galina's talk on shifts. I found it interesting that you're considering applying machine learning techniques to ships and maybe expanding the parameter set in the future. I'm curious if you think this is an opportunity to perhaps also expand the role of satellite data in ways we couldn't do before. I know Mark DiMaria has shown in the past that simple metrics from microwave imagery can improve ship skill. And we've seen groups like SIMS have tremendous success extracting value from both microwave and infrared data with machine learning techniques. Do you think there's room to make ships, a leap better by incorporating things like that?
So ships is already using IR predictors, and using microwave predictors been always challenging ships. We tried it, but the problem is that ships needs to run every 6 hours. And as you very well aware of, microwave data are not Vera every 6 hours, and sometimes they are Vera, sometimes they're not Vera. And getting consistent input from microwave data has been a challenge. So I think if hypothetically we can get like a solid data set of microwave data, which we can use, like every 6 hours, then yes, we can try, but I don't think we're there yet. So maybe with things like tropics and with more of this small sats, maybe we get to that. And another thing with ships is that ships has like a very large number of predictors. So that makes me sometimes question if we should develop a separate model which would use just satellite data and kind of use it.
Yeah, so we actually have research going on right now. Yeah, we have research going on right now that has AI developed synthetic microwave imagery available based off the geostationary, and we're looking at the potential for predictors because, as Galina said, the issue previously with microwave predictors was that it wasn't always available for ships, but with these AI generated imagery, we have the potential to test out those predictors in that and see if that can provide additional information to the ship's data set.
Yeah, reminding everybody to announce who they are for the sake of the people online. Stan Goldenberg, HRD. I'm also going with Galina's talk. I know you can only show so much, but you had a lot of very interesting results there. First of all, I'm glad to hear anything about use of satellite data, of which there's been very little in the conference here. But that was a very large sample, and for it to be so consistent with ships. If I recall, ships was improving and then going down, whereas LGEMS was continually improving. That's extremely different results. A small sample, I could care less, but this was a 10-year sample, I think, or quite a large sample. Oh, well, you'll answer, but the other thing was, of course, guesses why the specific was so different. I'm sure you could talk an hour about it, but those are my questions.
Yeah, so for training, we use it 17 years of data, and that is less than what we use normally. So we working on adding climatology, and once we have that, we can train on the full data sets from 1982 to current, which will give us like 40+ years of data, so that might be improved. As to why E-specific is so different, well, I kind of, the real answer is I don't know. I think one place to look at is that the ocean structure is very different between Atlantic and E-Pacific. And another question I had for observational people here, because I don't know answer, is if it's possible that there are simply more measurements in the Atlantic, and I just don't know what is the quality of subsurface ocean data, and if it's the same in Atlantic and E-Pacific, or if it could be different. It wasn't actually difference between ships and LGEM. It was more difference between Atlantic and East-Pacific. In the Atlantic, we did get improvement for both models, but for East-Pacific, they did really bad for a long forecast time. And I mean, another thing is that for larger forecast time scales, we have much smaller sample. So there could be some issues with overfitting there, which, so we're going to tune that. Oh yeah, Greg is on this project, so we're talking to him.
So I'm Fanny Yang, I'm from NCP. I have a question for Ping. So this 3D TKE scheme is very important, not only for HAFS and also for the future, all the UFS applications will move to higher and higher model resolution. My question is, you should here, it seems works well for the hurricanes, but will it work for the, say, mid-Atlantic, the shallow PPR scheme, or do we have to use a different PPR scheme?
Yeah, I think the reason people using TKE scheme is that as long as you can accurately predict the TKE share production, buoyancy production, so you don't have to worry about the inversion that caps the boundary, because above the inversion, the TKE share production and buoyancy production is nearly negligible. So that's why the TKE scheme can be applied to both deeper and shallow convection regimes. So even though we started with a hurricane, it should be applied to anywhere else, because that's the key for the TKE scheme. Because it does not depend on the boundary, because a lot of PBL schemes, they parameterize the turbulence based on the diagnosed boundary height. They use different ways to treat the above the boundary and below the boundary. But once you theoretically, if you use TKE scheme, you do not have to do that, because the way to calculate the shear production and buoyancy production should automatically consider this. So my answer is that you should be able to apply to other conditions as well, shallow region as well.
I asked a question for Pingzhu about your talk. You focused on the changes to the TKE equation, but you didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't comment on changes to the governing equations, like the UV and W equations, because there should be horizontal terms as well. Did you add those to the model?
No, because that one already in the HAFS, because HAFS treats the TKE as a tracer. So you already have the advection term, which is using my equation, the DE dt, which already includes the local change and the advection term.
I'm talking about changes to the horizontal velocity equations.
No, we didn't change the horizontal equations. We only change what we only do is we use the 3D TKE budget equation.
Those terms in the TKE shear production term ultimately arise from the horizontal velocity equations. So if you want to be internally consistent in your model and actually have the feedback.
No, the shear production term is we use, because in the HAFS you have 3 grids, you have the C grades, D grades, and then we consulted with Locus, and from the GFDL, he said that we should use A grade. So this is because it's consistent, because all the CCPP UVW is coming from the A grade. But since we cannot calculate the horizontal differential, so because CCPP is only a one column framework, so we calculate the 3D actually in the dynamic core, because you have to do that, and then we transfer the 3D shear terms into the CCPP.
Okay, I'm going to suggest you guys go offline and maybe bring Kong Lin
Yeah,
into the discussion.
we're basically out of time, but I wanted to give Chris Lancey the chance to ask his question that he typed in quite some time ago. Chris, if you're still on, would you like to ask?
Sure. Just interesting results by Pooh. I was wondering, are there plans to fly the Doppler wind lidar again, routinely or experimentally? And if so, what platform would that be available on?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think my results definitely showing the beneficial to have both Doppler wind lidar and also tied Doppler radar, so make them together. But I think it's essentially HRB's role. So whether they're going to fly again or not, so maybe I turn to Frank for him to answer this question.
I can comment. Sorry, I couldn't go to the meeting. My computer is flooded. So look at the so Chris, for the Doppler wind lidar data, Joshua assimilated. Those are from Dave Emmett, and when we work with Bob Atlas, Dave Emmett, we got funding. We supported him, but that funding ended. So currently we don't have any wind lidar on P3. But my colleague Jen Wang from University of Colorado, he is testing a new wind lidar system. So it's a small downward-looking wind lidar. We haven't tested on P3 yet, but the work is ongoing. Thank you for the comment.
Okay, I think we have to stop it there. We are already into the break. I think thanks to all the speakers, and thanks for all the questions.
Thank you, and Chandra, thank you for hosting that session. And I'm extending the start of the next session is pushed back 5 minutes to 4 o'clock so that we can take our full break.